Oh, yeah.
We'll get the man with the stroller to come down, then we can walk up the ramp.
Oakley, wait. Freeze, Oakley.
Oakley, red light. While we're here, I want to point out the roundhouse is a structure that was built with a steam engine and only the steam engine in mind. Okay.
Mami, este cover my YouTube channel.
So as you look around, you'll see that we have a freight car. We have an oddball piece called a steam heater, a passenger car, diesel electric locomotive, a caboose. They're not supposed to be here. Only the steam engines are supposed to be here. We'll find out why when we get up to the top of the ramp. So please follow me. The train.
Follow the train.
Are you making a YouTube video? Okay. Did you tell everybody where we're at? You should say where we're at.
We put it on the bottom. Yeah.
Oakley, no ready? Oh, Ashton, he went to there. Should we have a report for you?
No.
Okay, there's no bathroom in here, honey. Hold on.
Alright. I know why the train's so pretty.
That's a new.
Yeah, just doing it here for now. They're fixing it.
Yeah, I've never seen a train inside here before.
I have. They're working on it right now. Okay. That is good.
All right, so we saw all these things that don't belong in here, and the reason why the roundhouse is built with the steam engine is because the steam engine requires almost constant attention. With the diesel electric locomotive running, all you have to do is hit a few switches, push a button, and it's ready to go in about 5 minutes. With a steam engine, you're constantly maintaining a fire. You're constantly watching how much water is in the boiler. You're constantly watching how much steam pressure you're making. If you make too much steam pressure, you have to release that to the atmosphere. And all these parts that are very simple in how they work, back and forth, round and round, up and down, they don't necessarily want to work together. So the more parts you combine, the more complicated the steam engine can be. And all these parts that rub against one another can wear each other out. So every single day of a steam engine's operation, it has to come into a roundhouse of some sort to be inspected before it's kicked back out the door. So this was a very busy place. A steam engine would park, so the smokestack is underneath these metal hoods called the smoke jack to let the smoke out of the building. You don't want to suffocate your workers by smoking them out. They would even open up the windows to let as much light in as possible because they get dirty very quickly. Some of the roundhouses have an extra room above the roof line just with more windows for better ventilation and for better lighting. This one has a rather low roof. But anyway, when the steam engine comes to a stop, a team of 5 to 10 men start attacking the engine, hitting it with ball-peen hammers. And if you hit things with ball-peen hammers enough, you know what tight feels like and you know what loose feels like. You pick up the knack, and if something's loose, you tighten it. Maybe you have a wrench in your pocket. You hit all those nuts and bolts, the nut might be loose, you tighten it. No big deal. You move on to the next one. If you notice, as you're doing that, you're noticing for any leaks of water, leaks of steam, anything that looks unusual or sounds or feels unusual, then you address that. There are men on top of the engine, men alongside the engine, and men even underneath the engine with the inspection pits, looking for what went wrong. Now, on a day-to-day basis, what could possibly go wrong? You tell me. Leaks, hoses, yes. Hoses are usually made out of rubber. Rubber deteriorates really quickly. So therefore, maybe there's a piece of metal it hit along the way, so the air brake system isn't working the right way. So you have to have a replacement hose. Maybe just a little rubber gasket between the hoses. If that's gone, then you have air leaking. So anything that can go wrong is addressed, and you might think if you looked at the list of things they have to check, this would take several hours. But it's actually more like 35 minutes. Maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. But generally, about a half hour because you're doing this every single day with every single engine. Some engines have a personality. We know for Thanksgiving time, the family comes together, you know what personalities to deal with. Sometimes you know what not to say, and sometimes you poke the bear. That's sort of like with the steam engine. They have their personality, you know what to hit first. So therefore, if you fix that problem that's always a problem, then you can go on to things that might be new problems. That's what they had to look at with these steam engines. When it was done, they would send it back out because they need this space for the next engine to come in and go through the routine too. Like I said, it's a very busy railroad yard. I've been told by some of the railroaders who worked here in the 1940s that they said on average a train left or entered Scranton every 20 minutes. So that means that you have to make room in the roundhouse because roughly every 20 minutes another train is coming in, and that train might have one locomotive, it might have 2 or 3 or 4. And therefore you have to make room for 2 or 3 or 4 or one locomotive based on how many locomotives are in that. Because all those locomotives need the same level of attention, even if it's only one train. So anyway, that's what the roundhouse is for. If you find something that's much more complicated than they can take care of with the simple tools in the roundhouse, they have other buildings. We're going to go there next. Are there any questions about the roundhouse before we head there? Quite all right, we're going to head down to the bottom of the ramp, the point of no return, and you can decide if you want to stay with me next.
Like about to get killed or something. He said.
Wait, are we gonna stay?
Yeah, we're gonna keep going. I know you're really into trains. Dad and Joey might be out.
Is there more in your...
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they're coming right there. Are you guys coming? Dad, are you guys staying with us or no? Are you coming? Okay. Alright, pause the video.
Fill positions. I don't know where we stand on it because we shut down kind of through the window off. But anyway, yeah, if you can fill out an application, go ahead and again, at least get a file for yourself. Internships are through the schools. I don't know how that works, so you may have want to check with your schools. All right, we made it to this point. The point of no return. It doesn't look very dangerous on the other side, but where we're going, it can be a potentially dangerous area. It's a working facility. Now, since it's a holiday weekend, it might be very busy, it might not be busy. With the train going out of town, sometimes all the mechanics go there. But that means it might be less noisy. But it's always going to be dirty. Keep that in mind. Especially if you have new clothes on, you want to have them last throughout the holiday season. Watch where you stop. Watch where you stand. Watch where you lean. Watch out for Scott. He's the dangerous one here. Okay. Thank you. I'll take care of that too. I will show you then when you get there. All right. Scott's always on the lookout for me too. Anyway, where we're going is potentially a dangerous place, but it's always a dirty place. So watch where you're walking. Watch what you lean against, especially if you use your elbow, because that elbow always seems to find that on-off switch. If you have a loose piece of clothing, the machine will pick you up and spit you off the other side. That's why we have 2 tours that we offer, because Kennedy loves dealing with injuries. I do not. So if you want to get hurt, come to her tour at 2 o'clock. Okay. Keep that in mind. We'll be back. All right. But also, when Gail closes the gate, we are stuck with each other till 12 o'clock. Okay. I hear there's lunch on the other side. I want to get you to your lunch as safely as possible. So this is your one and only chance to join or to back out. If you decide in 10 minutes you've heard enough, that's too late. All right? Keep that in mind. I'm opening up the gate.
It's okay.
I've never been back there before. Maybe oil somewhere.
I'm going to escape for just a minute, so take care of that tour problem.
Alright.
What's he doing?
He'll be right back. He has to fix something.
I have to give instructions to Gail. what we're going to do is walk from this building to the next building, but we want to open up these doors so we don't have to trip over this, leading to a potential missing of your lunch. So we're going to open up the doors. Come on over here, Deb. Top one is open. And one of the sometimes it'll stay open to open to each side. There we go. Stay right here till we get the next door. And then you can hit the bottom one to close after.
This is
How many
really
times have
cool.
we been here? Is this new? No? We're here so often. Oh, yeah.
It's new for Gail. It's new to Gail.
Is it new to you? No. He was making jokes when it was your first time. That's what I just never did. They make me climb over it.
Actually, we've never seen that.
I know. Look at that.
All right, we're being waved on.
All right, here we go.
But you too.
Watch where you stand.
No, I've never seen this part before.
This is an unusual surprise because almost every time when I gave a tour coming to a locomotive shop, they see an empty track, or they see a car or a truck parked on here. We'll talk about the locomotive in a few minutes, but I want to get back to that story about the coal. Underneath our feet lies about 75 to 80% of the world's supply of anthracite. It's a hard form of coal. When you burn it properly, keeping it properly stoked, it could theoretically burn forever. It does have a tendency to burn out because they usually have more marketable, smaller sizes, but theoretically it can burn forever. It's almost pure coal, almost pure carbon. Once you get it burning, it's very difficult to stop. And normally I point out the mountains in either side, but the windows are kind of dirty today. But over in this direction is one mountain. Where we looked near the beginning of the tour, we saw another mountain. The peaks of those mountains are about 5 miles apart from one another. Coal isn't even in the mountains, it's in the valley created by the mountains. It's not even on the other side of those same hills. So that's how rare that product is, and most of the world's supply is right here. That's why Scranton did so well in the late 1800s and early 1900s, when people like you and me wanted to stay warm and also didn't want to smoke out our house. It's rather smokeless. It burns hotter and longer, creating less smoke and less ash, and you can keep your house clean longer. When people realized the clean burning qualities of the hard coal, they demanded it to the point where 10 railroads relied on that one product to stay in business. So the railroads, coming into a rather small part of the world to gain access to this coal, had to find very innovative ways. There's not enough room for all the tracks for all 10 railroads to run side by side. So sometimes they shared tracks, sometimes they were stacked on top of one another. They had to come up with all kinds of agreements in order to gain access to the coal to take it to people all over the country and many parts of the world. So wow, yes. Very good. Now, there was a time though, that not long after World War II, and some people say even before World War II, the coal market was dropping very quickly. Even though it's smokeless, it was still a lot of work to put the coal into your furnace, into your fireplace, into however you were heating your house, even in your stove. My aunt lived in a house that never had any heat, but they had a stove. So the stove heated everything. They didn't have a furnace. So anyway, I guess my mother lived with her too, so it's the same situation. But anyway, it's not that reliable of a heat. But when people found that oil heat works a lot better, and you don't have to shovel anything, and then when natural gas came along, when electric heat came along, all the people who used to rely on hard coal went to other types of fuels to keep their houses warm. So the point where the railroad, looking at their fortunes, decided to get out of the steam engine business and start buying things like this. This is called an F3. This one dates to 1948. The earlier version of this one, called the FT, was designed in 1939. So within about 10 to 15 years, the railroads went from almost all steam to almost all diesel, getting rid of the steam engines because of the intense amount of work requiring roundhouses and turntables and everything else like this. With this, once again, diesel electric locomotive, like the blue one we saw in the roundhouse, hit a few switches, hit a button or two, it fires up, you do a brake test, it's ready to roll. When you don't need it, you hit the switches and button and it shuts down. If you want to get the engine to turn around, you have another one that looks like this, facing that way. So you'd have to move your engineer and not even a fireman, because you don't need somebody to maintain a fire if all you have to do is push the buttons and let the engine run. This changed the world of the railroad so dramatically that people lost their jobs nearly overnight. But in the days of steam, they didn't have this ease of operation. What they had was hard work and a need for people to stay on top of the work. They fixed things before they went bad, because if you let it go bad, it's going to go horribly, horribly wrong. So that's why they didn't have, let's say, warehouses full of spare parts. What they had were people, buildings like this, a machine shop, where all these green machines can do specialized jobs to take raw material. Maybe it's like sheets of steel like this. Maybe it's poles or rods or pipes. Take them over to a machine, turn on the machine, and look. You've got a rounded piece of steel instead of a straight piece of steel. Maybe you need to bore a hole in it. That's what the hole wizard is over there for. Maybe you need to trim on the outside of it. That's what that machine can do too. Some of the machines are very specific and some of them are very generic. You can just modify things and get a lot of things done. Almost like a mixer. Now when I was growing up, my mother always had an egg beater, sometimes the hand one and sometimes the electric one. They can make cakes and things like that. But she didn't have the mixer where you can adapt other things on it and use that same electric motor to get a lot of different cooking things done. So therefore, she had to buy one of everything that she needed. Whereas now they have machines that can do a little bit of everything, you just put on the attachment. That's sort of what some of this machinery is for. That sheet of metal will go into a device like this called a cave flanger. And as you run it in flat, you can increase the end of it. You can make a slight crease, you can make a tight crease. We actually built a new firebox with this machine to work inside the steam engine we're going to see next. That's what we can do in this shop. But believe it or not, as much as there's a lot of metal involved in steam engines, there's a lot of wood involved. And hopefully I will remember to tell you where this wood goes to work later on. So keep that wood in mind. All right? Any questions before we leave this room? All right, watch your step, follow me.
Action for this happy place. Go, Action. You're the one making the YouTube video. You don't have to stay with us. You can stay, follow him, okay?
Mommy, look at
Hear me.
this.
However, when it's going
not
through,
listening.
it means they're doing something that might be
That
more
part
visually
is
interesting
part
than
of that
anything I can
thing.
say about it. So, a little bit of everything, you know. There's no perfect day to be here, but every day is interesting. All right. During our tour today, we're going to see two steam engines that we're working on. One that's considered operational, which is this one, although her parts are taken apart all over the place. The cab, this is where the engineer and the fireman do their work, which normally rests on top of the back end of the boiler. And the firebox is more or less where you burn the coal. The boiler is where it's a barrel with a lot of pipes in it, and it's filled with water. Let's say this one has 250 gallons of water. It's not going to boil very quickly. So you have to give yourself preparation time. If you need to leave a train to leave at 11 o'clock, you don't start your fire at 10 minutes to 11. You don't start it at 10. You start it sometimes the day before. Give yourself plenty of time, because that means that if the water boils, it's going to grow the whole engine. Ever so slightly, you might not even notice it. But we do part marks where the engine meets the frame, so you can actually see that the boiler actually stretches about 3 inches from the time it's cold to when it's hot and ready to go. It doesn't just stretch lengthwise, it goes outward and upward, ever so slightly. It actually is a larger engine when it's hot. So anyway, you don't want to shock the metal by hitting up really quickly because all those plates of metal are held together by rivets. We'll talk about rivets when we get to the third locomotive, the one that will be running a long time in the future. So anyway, this engine is down for some firebox repairs, some resulting from when we built that firebox with the flanger back in 2006, 2007. The engine came back in service in 2016. It's almost a totally brand new engine, but even with nearly 10 years of operation, it's starting to wear out again. So we found a minor crack that led to it being a major crack, so we have a major replacement in the firebox we're building it into with the annual inspection, where we normally take a look at where that whistle is, a place called the steam dome, and where the pistons are, a place called the steam chest. We'll talk about those parts when we get to another engine too. But this engine we hope to have running, I'll cross my fingers on this, by April of next year. All right? Another engine that's going to be ready to run in 2027 will be around the corner.
I think it's gonna be Connie.
Are the mechanics who work on these truck services? Wow, over there. All right, engine number 2. A little bit smaller. This one is a very simple steam engine, even though it's complicated in some ways in how it operates. Very small boiler, 127 fire tubes. The big engine has 330 fire tubes. The fire tube, if you don't know, is where these holes are. It's a pipe that goes from a sheet like this near the smokestack down to the other end where they're burning the wood. This one's a wood burner. Another sheet that holds the pipes in place, and as the water around it, the heat goes through the pipes, the water around it gets hot, turns into steam, builds up, and systems have the ball on top of it. That's called the steam dome. And the steam keeps building up pressure, squeezing up more and more steam bits into that small space until it reaches operating pressure. Now, I don't remember the exact number of this. Let's say it's 150 pounds per square inch. With the other engine, the green engine, it's 150. That big engine over here is 257 pounds per square inch. Or maybe it's 275. I get the numbers confused. But anyway, pretty high. So anyway, when you're dealing with that, when you build up the steam pressure, if you don't put it to work, the steam engine will blow up. So you have to release it. That's part of the problem with steam engines. You have to have that steam ready, but you don't always have a track ready to run it on. So it could be something as simple as a red light stopping you from going further, and therefore steam has to escape the boiler, because you want to keep the engine ready to go. And you want to save the life of the people running the engine. So that's what that's for. This engine's going through a total rebuild. This showed up in Scranton in 1984 with much of the rest of the collection, and nobody looked at it until 2023. So almost 40 years sitting here, shoved off to the side. One of the bosses over here says, let's take her out and rebuild her. We can get her running by 2027. That's what he said. I'm not making promises for his work. But it's a rather simple engine. The boiler is sound. The fire tubes had to be replaced anyway. The frame, some brand new steel. You can stand the yellow line. Back to the yellow line a little bit. They get mad at me for letting you off the yellow line. So this is one piece of the frame. It's a rather simple frame. The other engines, the bigger engines, have cast frames. If you get a crack in a cast frame, there's very complicated welding. Sometimes with side beams, it's just a matter of replacement. This engine, when it makes its steam, when it makes its steam, it sends the steam from the steam dome into 3 pistons. It's called a geared locomotive. The pistons go up and down. At a third hand, I can show you how that works, but make the leap. So anyway, as they're going up and down, they're turning your crankshaft. The crankshaft goes along the side of the boiler and into the frame and connects with gears on the wheels. They go behind you. What do you know? We have some gears on the wheels. Gears on the crankshaft. This is pretty solid. This doesn't need much more than cleaning, re-greasing, and putting it back to work. So some parts of this engine are very simple and in good shape. Other parts around that, not so great. This is called a kingpin. Most of what holds a steam engine together is gravity. Some parts you can't make too tight because the engine will fight you. You can't keep things too loose because they will fall apart. So you kind of rest on weight holding things together. And this kingpin keeps it from the wheels from running away from the boiler. Kind of innovative. Kind of spring work and things like that has to be addressed. But still, much of this stuff is rather simple. It's just time consuming, and that's why we're going to have to give ourselves at least another year before we get this ready to run in spring of 2027. These locomotives are not meant for speed. They're not meant. They're very powerful though. So these will probably be assigned to what we call yard train duties, running back from the roundhouse through a short trip distance in the railroad yard and seeing some of the city, and then coming back to give you an idea of what a steam engine operating sounds and looks like. So anyway, we have other engines that will be going out of town on higher speeds, and we'll get to that. But are there any questions about the Shea or the Baldwin locomotive before we leave here? Yeah. Good question. Would people work overnight to keep the fires going? And the answer is yes. Because you can bank a fire. You know you're not going to need an engine for a while. So when the railroad was running, they would have a part of the yard called Hogtown. Because sometimes they might need locomotives some days, but not every day. So you have to keep that fire going, even if the engine's not going to be used that day. Because like I said, there's some busy times of the season, sometimes there's slow days, sometimes you need those 4 locomotives, like I said, sometimes one will do the job. The exact same train from one day to the next. So therefore they have a person called the hostler. And when the engines are sitting in Hogtown, they would go from locomotive to locomotive to locomotive, making sure there's plenty of water in the boiler, making sure that the fires haven't gone out. Some of these engines are designed to run hot and cold. And when they run cold, the fire puts itself out. Some engines just are so reliable, the fire will maintain itself. But once again, that's like the personality you learn by working on the engines all the time. And you don't know until you get that practice with the engines. Very good question though. Now we're going to talk about other engines when we get to a photograph and talk about the pieces and parts of Boston and Maine 3713. Follow me, stand the old line. That's all I tell you to do it off. Some parts of the engine are really easy to identify.
It's Connie.
Right here. The cab where the firemen and the engineers do their job is right here. Here you can't get off the line. Please do not go up or down the ramp. We have the pony truck with a reinforced kingpin. That one that's whittled down to almost nothing would have looked something like this. Yeah. Time and weather can wear these things down. We have a boiler. We have a frame. This is a cast frame. No I-beams here. This was a solid piece of metal poured in molten form into a casting, and then they pulled it out. That's why this is solid. This is why it's more durable. Before they came up with the cast frame around 1917, 1918, they had assembled parts with nuts and bolts and rivets, and therefore, when you have things holding plates of metal together, they can get loose. And those are things that they would check on in the roundhouse with the engines. Getting on to rivets. I might have to walk around. I'll box myself in.
Ashton, back up.
All right.
Oh.
You see there's a lot of holes in the locomotive.
Yeah.
Every one of those has to be filled by something like a stay bolt or a rivet. Now, if you look at them up close, they look very similar. But when they're ready to use, they look completely different. So I'll start with the rivet. All right. In order for a rivet to do its job is to hold 2 or more plates of metal, flush one up against another. Airtight, watertight seal. In order to get to that point, you have to set this on fire. In this device called the forge, Now, they write hot a lot, unless as a reminder. You don't get used to things that say hot and you touch them. So that's more as a reminder to keep your hands away from things like that. So when this is on, they put it on and they cook it until it gets to the point where it's like the yellow. This is yellow.
Wow.
That's called white hot. Red hot is hot and it will make a hard cell, but it won't seal it. So it'll be a hot bolt, and that's usually what you need for some conditions. But when you're dealing with the pressure of a boiler, water and air getting in or out of it means that it's not going to work properly. So that's why this has to be white hot, and that's what means it's gooey enough to fill in those gaps. This particular type of rivet holds this outside wall of the firebox, a block of metal here called the mud ring, and the combustion chamber, which isn't in here yet, at a proper distance as an airtight, watertight seal. Because this is the bottom of where the water is. There's water between this plate of metal and that plate of metal that's inside here that isn't there yet. So that's what this job is here. Go up a few steps, then you've got the need for the stay bolt. Now this stay bolt isn't ready to go just yet. It needs a slot in the head and needs threading going down the shaft. So what a stay bolt does is it holds the plates of metal at the proper distance from one another. There are different types of stay bolts. This one's called a flexible stay bolt because it has a ball head on the end, and that would fit into a sleeve in these larger holes. There's a cap that goes on that sleeve, and that means that you can undo that cap, take a look at the bolt and see if it's in good shape. But if it's a straight bolt, stay bolt, then it has a hole running all the way through the shaft. They fill that with some mud, like a cement, and when the water finds a weak spot, it will start going into the center of here and letting some steam or water out, depending on whether there's steam or water in that part of the firebox. They call that weeping. So one of the inspections you do in the roundhouse is you check for weeping spots. It'll be a little stain coming out from that stay bolt. One is not a problem. Two together might be a problem. Three together starts becoming a problem. So if there's one here and one there, that's not a problem. But because they have to pull the steel at the proper distances, that means there's a lot of pressure. Water pressure pushing the walls away. The differences of temperature from the fire burning here, the water boiling here, about 400 degrees, and the atmospheric temperature, which is kind of low today, that means that they're being pushed and pulled apart from one another. The stay bolts keep it where it needs to be. The fact that the engine's in motion means it's rocking all over the track. There's very little straight or flat track in the world. Even if it looks straight and flat, it's all over the place. And this is constantly helping the engine, which is one size when it's cold, another size when it's hot, adjust to that motion and expansion and contraction. That's why there's so many of them. The need for all those to hold it together and yet hold it apart at the same time. The people who designed this stuff were geniuses. Now we can understand the concept of boiling water, taking the steam and putting it to work. This engine takes the steam and puts that to work. What do I mean by that? If you don't mind standing back for a second. This print here is opposite from the boiler, so jump with me. The firebox is where you're making the heat. Heat goes straight up, right? But because of the fire tubes drafting from one side to the other, they're sending out to the smokestack. If you look at the combustion chamber, you'll see the different size holes. When we were over at the little locomotive, we saw the holes are all the same size. Same size as the piping that's the railing of the walkway. We made those railings out of old fire tubes. So that's the first, what one man called the circulating system. Heat going from one end to the other, boiling the water. Around the 1880s, they developed a device for getting more use out of the steam. Steam goes from the steam dome, and then they would send it into the boiler again through a device called the header. Superheater header. We see a little bit of a hole near the front end of the firebox. That's where the header would be. And connected to the header are 40 superheater tubes. And they send the steam through the boiler. Back and forth, and back and forth. By sending the steam through the hot space of the boiler, you're drying out the steam and you're raising the temperature, and you're getting about 20% more effective use out of the water you're boiling and using the same amount of fuel. So you're actually making more energy effective. It was invented in the 1880s. It wasn't put into use until 1910. It was more or less a coal strike in 1902, 1903 that forced the railroads to actually pay the coal companies to pay the coal miners. They're working for practically nothing. And you could go to work from sun up to sundown, as they say, and still not have enough money to feed your family. Families were much larger in those days too, because you thought if you had enough children, they could all help support the family. So anyway, it was like a never-ending cycle. So they went on strike for a year and a half. And anyway, when the strike was resolved, the railroads realized, oh, coal's going to cost us something now. How do we get better use out of our coal? The superheater was already invented. They just had to put that into their locomotives. So it was a way of getting better use out of the fuel. This engine, being built in 1934, is rather about as modern as you can get. This one has a third circulating system, because during World War I, or around that time, they found out that if they're taking measurements of the temperatures of the water in the boiler, it's slightly changing. It's all boiling water, but it's different temperatures. How do you keep it consistent? Well, as you can probably imagine, the hottest boiling water is where the coal is burning. Second hottest is on the steam dome, because heat's going to rise even among the steam and the boiling water. But the further you get away from that, even only 30 feet away, it's starting to get cooler. The tubes are extracting more heat out of the water is extracting more heat out of the fire tube before it actually exhausts out of the engine. So they developed another device called the thermic siphon. Let me just bring in a pencil here. It's like a flattened funnel. So that will take the pure boiling water from the bottom up here, run it through the firebox. The hottest part, they're taking that boiling water, running it through like a percolator, comes out the top. Because it's coming out the top, it's already displacing the water that's up there, running it back and forward. System of moving that water around. And in addition to the splashing effect of water inside there, I forgot the word, it'll come to me. But anyway, as the water splashing around, it's literally bursting into steam. That allows this engine, more than those engines, in addition to their 80-inch drive wheels, more or less from here to here, 5 feet 8, 6 feet 8. Anyway, when those wheels get that big, that allows the engine to go in the neighborhood of 100 miles an hour. This engine, when it's ready to run, theoretically can go 100 miles an hour. But one thing I can guarantee you is we will not be going 100 miles an hour with this train. Does anybody know why? Give me a guess.
Derailments.
The tracks, that's a big part of it.
Derailments.
Derailments, yeah, you don't, and usually derailments are caused by too fast and bad track, that combination. So anyway, the reason why we can't go high speed is because we don't own much more than the railroad yard. And when we go onto some other railroads, rail lines, we have to follow their rules. There are 3 or 4 different railroads we could work with. We mostly work with one railroad. But they're going to maintain the track to fit their needs. So right now they hold the track to 35 miles an hour, no faster, because it's meant to be safe. Now they could probably move their trains faster, but they are moving freight. Freight doesn't have to be anywhere in a hurry unless it's ready to spoil. People perish pretty quickly. Get us sitting still in a hot train or a cold train, you know very quickly. They're hot, they're cold, they're miserable. So that's why passengers are more important than the average freight car. But the most important are people who aren't even on the train. If you are standing at a crossing or waiting in your car or your bicycle for the train to pass, you expect certain things to be done for your safety, such as if a train's coming, it's going to blow the whistle or the horn of the locomotive. Then there'll be something activating or triggering on the track to make the lights flash, to make the gates come down, and the bell will ring to hold you back from that train. That's all based on how fast the track is maintained for by the freight railroads. So if they maintain it for 35 miles an hour and we go as fast as this engine can, 3 times the speed it's intended for, that means that any illusion of safety for you is thrown out the window, because that means that the train is long past before the gate comes down. Therefore, we can't go high speeds. But if we found a railroad that did have 100 mile an hour track, we could probably go that speed on theirs.
I'd like to see that test. Let us know.
That would be nice, yes. Did you have a question before going? All right. Now we're talking about quite a few things about the steam engine up to this point and the machinery, and we also heard Alex making a little bit of noise over at the boiler. Anyway, what are we doing this for? That always comes up, especially when you start thinking, how much money does it cost to keep this thing going? Well, the reason why we do this is because we're, as a national park, all national parks, the 433 of them right now, they are all here to hold on to one slice or another of American life. Our story is the steam era of railroading. We're not just about this one railroad or how we maintain things, but more or less a continuing operation because the nature of steam has not changed. You're still dealing with water, you're boiling it, you're capturing the steam, you're putting it to work. At one time, the nature or the culture of the railroad was the same as the culture of the United States. Because the railroad relied so much on people, people relied so much on the railroad, they were intertwined. That's the time period around 1900 to 1930, give or take. A little bit more, a little bit less. But in 1920, when they took the U.S. Census, that was the first time we had over 100 million people in America. 2 million worked for the railroad. Go back 10 years to 1910, 85 million people. 2 million worked for the railroad. Go back to 1900, 65 million Americans. 2 million worked for the railroad. There's an entire generation's worth of the same number of people needed for the railroad to do its job. In the 1800s, there weren't as many railroads, they weren't as connected. People were boomers, they were going from spot to spot, wherever they could get work. By 1930s, the railroad was pulling itself out of the culture because they were hiring fewer people. But in the days of steam, the steam engines, the amount of steam engines the railroad needed required so many people to stay on top of the engines. Staying on top of the engines meant you had to have buildings like this, and somebody dealing with the power sources, and it's not always electric. It might have been steam powered. It could have been a lot of other things. And there were times before welding, so they had people doing other types of welding that was more or less like blacksmithing. And blacksmithing changed over the years too. Because of that need for so many people, the railroad thrived to a degree, but also they were bleeding money. Another thing that changed around the 1930s is the accounting methods that were institutionalized in the 1840s were found to be false. As long as the railroad was making money and they were spending money, they were flush with cash. Until new accounting methods came into place around the 1930s, when they were actually looking at why are we in a Great Depression, I guess. They realized that they weren't accounting for the decay of the things that they had. They knew they had brand new locomotives, they knew they had old locomotives, but each year those new locomotives are getting a little bit older. The bridges are getting a little bit older. The signaling system is getting a little bit more older and outdated. They're introducing telegraph and telephone, that require maintenance. So therefore they were realizing that they had no money at all. And they decided to start getting rid of the workers and getting to another machine that could do the same job, maybe even do it better. It took a long time for the diesels to be as powerful as a steam engine, but they decided that power wasn't as important, speed wasn't always as important as reliability. And if you can just hit switches and push buttons and have the engine ready, the train ready to go, that was going to be your cost-saving factor. The diesel electric locomotives were much more expensive than the average steam engine. When that first diesels were made in 1939, similar to that gray and maroon one we saw in the other room. Well, anyway, when they did that, that was about $1.5 million for that set. The average steam engine was about $100,000. But the saving came in by not having so many people to stay on top of the steam engine every day, day in and day out. A lot of people lost their careers. And because this alarm went off, which means we're 5 minutes left, what did I forget to mention? The wood, yes. So I'll tell you where the wood goes when we get to walk over here, because we're on our way out.
You wanna wash?
See, even when the tracks are flush with the ground, you can still trip.
Stand back a little bit, he said.
If you look at the metal frames just past the scale, they don't look like anything. Put some wheels in them, they start looking like something. Those are the truck frames for the tender. When we start rebuilding the truck frames with the springs, the brake rigging, the hangers, and everything else that goes on them, they're going to be integrated with this frame. Right now the frame is upside down, that's why it's kind of bumpy. But when we get the trucks and together with the frame, we're going to pick that frame up with the overhead crane, flip it over, and then put the wood on as a bed. Almost like laying a mattress. And then we take the huge tank that carries the coal and the water and put that on top of the frame. They found that they had metal sitting against metal. not only is with all that weight, it's going to start distorting the shape of the metal, but also starts rusting a lot more quickly. But if they put it on wood, there's a separation between the metals and they're not going to rust as fast. And the wood helps to balance out the weight, especially when there's unevenness in the weight. So that means that's why the wood is just as important as all these other things I was telling you about. All right, I will entertain any questions as we walk on our way back. Take a slightly different path and then I'll set you free.
We're leaving. We're walking now. Not even 2 minutes.
Wait, we're leaving now?
We're gonna have to leave in a little bit.
I don't know.
We can look at
I don't know. See
the
that.
video now before it's too long to upload. Might be too long.
No, it could be as long as it wants. Sometimes I see videos that are like hours long. One time I saw a video that's 11 hours long.
Wood starts flaking away and it's still on fire because the smokestack, you guys set the world on fire. But if you have a screen inside that smokestack, it breaks them up until there's only sparks coming out. It can still start fires, but it's not as likely.
Isn't that the one that used to
So
be
that's the
outside?
liability I think we're talking about.
Yeah,
How much
right?
problems you can have with coal or wood or oil. But you have to have something burning in order to boil water.
Look at it.
All right. Yes. Okay, good question. How's the water make the wheel push make the wheels go? That's where we are here. I was going to point that out and I forgot. It's actually steam coming through here. You might see water coming out, but steam coming from the steam dome eventually works its way into the steam chest. A valve here will send the steam down to this side or that side based on how the valve is set. It's set by the engineer inside the cab. So he pulls a lever one way or another and that sets the valve to go this way or that way. When steam comes down, let's say the valve is here, the steam is going to come down this way. The steam that's compressed expands and pushes the piston here. And because the piston is connected to a rod or linked to various other parts connected to the wheels, it moves the wheels part of the way. But as it's doing that, everything's connected, so it's setting the valve to move the other direction, so the next compressor steam is going to come down.